Jack here, JBF Music and Guitar Lessons. In this quick guitar tricks we're looking at 3 slash licks, whereas the other lessons I've done like this so far are focused on a particular mode or scale, like my Nuno Betancourt licks lesson, card up there. This one will be focusing on following the chord or playing over chord changes, hopefully shedding some light on some of Slash's favourite ways of tackling this. As usual, there will be some note analysis and theory, but if you just want the licks and less of this talking business, check out the timestamps in the pinned comment or the video description. First up, a lick from Don't Cry and a bonus trick right off the bat, which sort of contradicts the main theme of this tutorial. You don't need to always follow the chord. In fact, the very first beat of the bar we have a D being bent up a tone to an E. Now if we look at the chords I've put alongside the tab there, you'll notice it's an F5 or an implied F major from the scale, being made of the notes F, A and C. D is at 6th and E major 7th, and this double stop, well, if you want an example of how you could use this double stop to follow a chord if you want to, check out this essential double stops lesson. But yeah, like I was saying, this other note here, this G, is F major's 9th, so really Slash is implying a rather jazzy F major 7 add 9. So rather than simply sticking to the triad chord tones of 3rd and 5th, we've got some more complex intervals. Well, the theory is fun to analyse, well I think it is anyway. The real benefit comes from when you can derive uses from said theory. Here, I'd say using the major 7 interval creates a sense of real yearning, quite mournful and very sonically impactful. The addition of the 9th only reinforces this vibe, which given the song's title seems incredibly fitting. Almost like holding back tears or something. I realise I've gone on a bit of a tangent in a much more subjective area, to which I'd really welcome some discussion in the comments. It'd be great to hear your guys' take on this sort of stuff. But yeah, my tutorials tend to be quite heavy on the theory side of things, and this is one of the main reasons why a lot of the time you can reverse engineer licks to add new colours to your guitar playing palette. Anyway, back on track here. So after hitting this G 3 times with the band, we resolve to a C, which is in fact in our F major chord, F A C, C being the 5th. So not only is Slash not strictly followed the chord or implied an extension to be more specific, he's then even resolved the lick, so it's not too out there. What a guy. We have a variation on this theme, only this time it's being played over a G5 or G major. So this time bending the D to the E gives a 6th, while the next note G is obviously the root. Then a C going down to the B, which again resolves the phrase, B being G's 3rd. The next bar has the chords E5 and F, both implied major. The E might seem a bit weird. In A minor you'd often expect an E minor, but in A harmonic minor it has a sharpened 7th. G sharp. G sharp is E's major 3rd, which means we get an E major, or E dominant 7 if you extend it, if the chord is being built around the harmonic minor scale, which in this case is being derived from that. But these are pretty much just outlined using triplets for a cool staggered effect. So what we have is these first 3 notes being the E, the G sharp and the B, sliding up to the D. So So an E dominant 7 exactly, an arpeggio. But with this little grace note to maybe make it a bit more interesting or musical. Then using C as a passing note to get back to the B. The next C is when the chord shifts up to F major, F being F, A and C, so we're on its 5th, coming down the 3rd A, and then the root F, the root up the octave, the 5th, and then revisiting that nice little major 7. Bar 3 we're hanging on that 6th, then it's back to the major 7 with the bend, resolving down to the 5th. The chord change to the G happens during this bend. Essentially here we're playing an A minor lick over a G major chord, which if you did for any length of time would sound quite sour. Here, because it's just half the bar, it works quite well to build some tension. So the A minor lick there. Like if you did that over a G all the time, it's going to sound weird. But we can use it in passing because it's in the right key, and like I say, it's just going to create a bit of tension without being too out there or too sort of strange or anything like that. So the thing to take away from this bar is rather than extending the chord, you can always just play in key and reference the main chord or tone of the A minor. Sorry, A, D, and it will sound good. If you do this too much, it is going to sound a bit directionless and widdly though. A real Slash trademark. We got some funky scratches. Does those all the time. If you want some Slash sounds in your solos, put in as many of these kind of, muted scratches as you can. Bar 4, it sees a final double stop over the A minor. We're bending a D up to the E, so targeting A's 5th. However, we've got a G just sitting here on the B string, but it still sounds pretty good. Why? Well, if we extend A minor to an A minor 7, we get an A, C, E, and a G. G being the flat 7th. So this effect is a pretty cool, also fairly complex for a hard rock song, a pretty cool effect. Slash has implied a minor 7 chord, and in doing so, he's given a kind of resolution, so the solo isn't left feeling incomplete. However, the lilting, melancholic quality of a minor 7 chord, so for example, A minor 7, it's a bit tricky to get the sound with all the gain, sorry. Or, let's try this voice and this might be a bit better. That's the wrong chord entirely. Let's try that one again, there we go. Yeah. So that kind of sound is what he's implying here. And again, it feels as if there's maybe something being left unsaid. Again, a solo that really suits the vibe of the song. I doubt Slash was sitting there analysing his playing note for note. I suspect he might have just developed really quite a good ear through years of playing. I mean, he might be a theory nerd for all we know, but, just to reinforce the point, the best way to find out why you like a solo lick or sound and how you can capture a similar effect in your playing is to do this, is to analyse it, look at what's going on, and try to make some sort of sense of it. A few bars from Night Train that really highlight some key Slash tricks. First up, let's think about the chords. We have an F sharp 5 for 2 bars, followed by a D5 for 2 bars. Changing on the last 8th note of each 2 bars. This sort of implies an F sharp minor and a D major, but we'll touch on that soon enough. I'm just calling that second bar bar 1, although the note is technically played before the first beat. We have an F sharp, A, and C sharp. Those theory-minded among us will have clocked this as an F sharp minor triad. It's quite interesting that most of us wouldn't think of Slash as using arpeggios as much as, say, Yngwie Malmsteen, Paul Gilbert or Marty Friedman, relevant arpeggio lessons with that card in the top right there. But when you look at his playing and analyse it, he does sneak an awful lot of them in. This E suggests an F sharp minor 7, although at this point we're really just going for a minor pentatonic lick, having already established the underlying chord of F sharp minor. Here Slash is doing the Hendrix bend, lesson card up there, bending the E string, catching the 12th fret on the B, when bent, and then returning it to pitch. The pentatonic lick continues and resolves to F sharp, which also acts as the transition to the next chord of D, D being D, F sharp, and A. He's hitting the D a beat early in terms of following the chord, but it just sets up the next lick so well it doesn't really matter. Next, a real classic rock and roll lick that this type of thing is all over his playing, hitting this double stop on the chord change, down to the 4th, G, then F, F sharp, root. So flat third, third, root. Now, this shouldn't really work all that well at all. Our ears should be expecting a more major or Ionian sound. But we are being given a Mixodorian thing, more on that with the card up there. I hypothesise that this has worked because Slash used common notes between the chords as a pivot modulation of sorts. And because of the genre, we're sort of expecting some bluesy ideas. Back to the double stop, and then this little double stop bend, implying Dorian, quite firmly cementing a minor tonality, a typical bluesy lick to round things up. So that bit. With a nice little quarter tone bend on that flat third. Next, targeting the F sharp from the E by bending it up a tone. Following that chord change on the last beat of the bar again. This looks like a pretty standard minor pentatonic run, and for the most part it is, reinforcing the underlying F sharp minor chord. However, you'll notice, and you might have heard it there, that last note of the bar is an A sharp, which is actually from an F sharp major, rather than a minor. Now, it's not unusual in rock music to play a minor over the major, which comes from the bluesmen playing minor over kind of dominant 7 chords. It's quite unusual to play a major interval over a minor tonality, but here it just works and sounds really cool. Since Slash is only playing over the power chords with no major or minor third, it gives him a bit more wiggle room in terms of the notes he can pick. There's still an implied harmony, and ignoring it will sound a bit like a mess, or pretty jazzy to be liberal with with terminology. But subtly highlighting a few different shades is totally legit. Back to the minor pentatonic with some really cool staggered triplets. So there we're just going flat third, root, flat 7th, root, flat third. Much less exciting than our weird little major third. Which, listening to the audio, like the solo, it's possible he played that note by mistake and they just left it in because it sounded awesome, because he does do sort of a weird slide down to it. It could be intentional, it might not be. If anyone's got any information on that, that would be really, really cool to know. I don't know. So I'm just transcribing them and assuming that you meant to do everything as it is. Because, I mean, it just sounds great. Anyway, rambling aside, in these last 2 bars, Slash is using 6. It's pretty common in country and blues as well, I suppose. So over the D, he's playing its 5th and its 3rd. So A and F sharp. If you think of this D chord, it might help make a bit more sense where the notes will come from. Sliding it in from a semitone below, totally out of key, but used in passing, it just adds this kind of cool raunch. A bit like Chuck Berry's rock and roll leads, you know, that kind of thing. This is really clever guitar work. The A and the F sharp are F sharp minors, flat third, and root. So this is a really smooth way of pivoting between these chords. So a way of explaining it, I suppose, we've got the D here, and if you know your arpeggios, there's an F sharp minor. So you can see that these 2 notes are both in a D and in an F sharp minor chord. So he's using the 2 notes that you could pick that would transition between the chords in the smoothest possible way. Absolutely brilliant. And we're repeating this idea little kind of a slash scratch there, tongue twister, up to the 9th fret. Again, playing the 6th interval. Now here we could say it's suggesting an E major or a G sharp minor, but it's really just used in passing, so I wouldn't say that's happening. And then we're up to the 11th and the 10th frets here, a C sharp and an A. On this beat the chord has changed, and right enough we're playing F sharp's minor 5 and 3rd. Flat 3rd I should say, sorry. If you think about this F sharp minor chord shape, you can see both notes in it. Finally, this lick from the end of the Mr. Brownstone solo, not quite as heavy on the theory as the other ones here, so our brain gets a bit of a breather. Bit of workout for the fingers though. This is really quite a tricky lick to play, well, for me anyway. And in all honesty, I just use whatever combination of picking techniques, be it alternate, economy, hybrid, just whatever, or some odd, picking mechanism, legato, whatever works best for you. I think I tend to play it with alternate picking, but I think I also have a tendency to add in some economy at higher speeds. Anyway, this part of the solo is being played over the chords from the We've Been Dancing with Mr. Brownstone part of the song. It's maybe the chorus or the pre-chorus. It goes like this. So essentially a G, a C, and a D. Then a riff which we'll look at in a minute. And that's what we see going on here, mixing the major and minor pentatonics. It's pretty much minor, apart from this major third. So over the G, it makes sense to be playing in G minor, which we are. But just the major at the very end, to wrap it up. The major does help give it a kind of greater sense of like final, that's kind of rounding up the lick. And then when we're over the C, if you think about the C here, and your C minor pentatonic, it makes sense that we're playing in this shape. He does change things up a bit, so he's not playing exactly the same lick all the way up the fretboard, which makes it trickier to pick and trickier to learn, but it makes it, in my opinion, better to listen to because it's not as predictable. There's this kind of like a exciting spontaneous element to it, spontaneous element, I should say. So again, just go into that major third to wrap up the lick. It's a really nice way of kind of putting a full stop at the end of each little section, I suppose. Then after that, we're on to a D. So again, if we think of the D minor pentatonic here. So the thing is here, there's a lot of modulation going on. He's changing keys, but because the chords underneath are changing as well, he's following them and it sounds good. Just to tie into that point, the main theme of the lesson of following the chords. And it's just all minor in D. Try that one a bit cleaner, I think I messed up, yeah. So just D minor pentatonic stuff there. And this aforementioned riff that goes D, C sharp, B, D, G. All power chords, I think. This C sharp might be an A, played like that, with the third in the bass. But for the lick analysis, we're going to ignore the bending part and just deal with the target pitch, which makes things a little bit easier. We're bending to a D, a C sharp, a B, a D, and then a G, which follows the chords to the letter, absolutely. The bending from a tone below does technically put things out of key, but in reality it just adds a bit of dirt. And it also makes it easier on the fingers to play one double stop shape instead of switching between two different ones. Final bonus tip. On the record, this solo has a lot of top end, it's very high, and it almost sounds like a phase reverse pickup. Oh, I can actually give you an example of that. So this would be a pickup, and if I phase reverse the pickup by itself. Let's play that live. So there's an awful lot of background hum, because it's phase reversed. I'll try it with the neck as well. So it's got this real kind of squawky, kind of country sound. That's what a phase reverse thing sounds like. I don't think he's done that here. I don't think he's got a phase reverse guitar. I think what he's done is basically pushed his wah-wah pedal down either all the way or most of the way to get that sort of scratchy, high-end, nasally sound, and using it to filter out the lower frequencies and boost those high ones to get this really kind of cool, snarly, phase reverse type sound. Those were some signature Slash guitar licks. I've been thinking about doing a more in-depth pro tips type thing on him, looking at Slash's playing and breaking down key areas of his approach to the guitar. If that's the sort of thing you might be interested in, let me know in the comments. I might also fire a poll up on this sort of thing fairly soon as well. But yeah, this has been Quick Tricks, that's the playlist there. Click here for more licks. If you've enjoyed this and want to stay up to date with the channel, hit subscribe, share, like, comment and enable notifications with that little bell on the side if you feel so inclined. Cheers guys.